We are now.
Thank you, Holly. Well, I'll call to order the September 16th meeting of the Nantucket Historical Commission. I'm going to start with checking in with the commissioners. Clement Durkis.
Here.
Thank you. Mickey Rowland.
Here.
Thank you. Abby DiMonalina.
I'm here. Sorry, I was muted.
Thank you. And David Silver.
Here. Morning.
Thank you. And staff, Holly Backus.
Good morning, present.
Thank you. And we have a friend and guest, Hillary. Thank
Hi,
you for
everyone.
joining.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So why don't we begin with public comment? Is there any? I'm not seeing public.
I have a public comment, actually,
Yes.
if
please.
you'll allow me. Yeah, so I have tuned into a threatened structure that's in my neighborhood. It's 126 Main Street. And so I was just listening in on meetings for that and hearing the HDC really wrestling once again. Some people will notice the picture that I have behind me, that this question of moving homes, and what I heard was, it just seemed like they'd like to have some guidance about how they should think about this, and what parts of structures are contributing, what happens when you remove features. And Holly, I know you're doing this, and this is part of your intense work with them, answering their questions. But I wondered, just in the spirit of public comment and raising things with this commission, if there might be a role or some benefit of this commission, making some kind of a statement advising them about that. Because it's not, I brought it up in a specific context, but it's really a global issue. I mean, it's an island-wide issue of the two commissions working together for preservation. So.
Thank you for bringing that up, Hillary. We've been looking at that through the Historic Structures Advisory Board for a number of meetings. And it is an issue, and I think that they probably could use some guidance and education with, what their rights and rules are. And Holly, can you offer any insight?
Yes, I just caution that this is under public comment, but it's duly noted. It's all about education, and as you all remember, we did an APC camp training, and it's about time that I send some reminders on just the standards from National Park Service of preservation, restoration, rehabilitation, reconstruction, what those all entail. But yes, character defining features and settings obviously is very, very important. And yes, this commission could provide some great feedback to the HDC. More or less, again, it's education. And if you keep it education component, that's my recommendation, the best bet, and that would help emphasize comments received by obviously staff, myself, and others.
Thank you, Holly. And the location and original foundation would all be character defining elements. Thank you. Are there any?
On that note, we at HSAB have been dealing with this project for a while, and we're advising them on sort of obvious design features and the sort of the desire to preserve the foundation, because you can't rebuild that and have it look the same. But there are some technical issues that I'm not that familiar with in terms of the historic status for the, I don't even know the terminology to use for that, but it was brought up. I read the minutes, and some of those things were brought up, and I saw your comments, Hillary, when you commented on it. But I think it would be useful, and Hillary, maybe you can enlighten us a little bit on what, when you move a building, it loses, or Holly, either one of you, it loses a status of its historic, original character defining features. So maybe you could just let us, just speak to that just real quickly.
Well, I brought this up as public comment, but it's not specific to this location. Like it is everywhere. And I mean, I think we have Holly, Holly knows all about this stuff and cares about this stuff. And Holly has contacts through her role as the CLG coordinator. Maybe we could maybe this commission through Holly could ask for some advice about this issue, because the hanging everything on the moving issue is actually a little problematic because it's not really being moved out of its context. So it's really more about the demolition, I think. The demolition of the foundation, which is a contributing structure, and it's the reconstruction. But maybe it's something to put on a future agenda. And I don't know, Holly, what do you think about that?
That would be the best bet, since it came under public comment, to put it on the next month's agenda. But yes, I mean, that's where our CLG coordinator with the state is there. And again, they're doing a lot of different virtual workshops. You've all seen my emails forwarding that about those. Again, that it would definitely be helpful. But yes, I would recommend putting this on as a top. But it's a good topic nonetheless. So thank you, Hillary.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just such a weird topic because I don't think there's any other community in America where it makes sense to move a structure such a small amount just to create a new buildable. Like, it's a unique issue for Nantucket, but so thank you for listening to my public comment.
Thank you. All right. So next on the agenda is approving the minutes from the July meeting. And then David also provided, I believe it was May as well.
April.
Or April, sorry. Thank you for that, David. Was everyone able to review the minutes? Was anyone
reviewed
able to
April.
review the minutes?
No, I reviewed April. I don't think I saw July, but
Should have August and April, I think.
okay. Well, I looked at April and they look fine.
I reviewed August
or
and it
Abby?
looked okay. Yeah, I wasn't here in April, so I didn't necessarily review them because I wouldn't know if they were accurate, but I did review August and it looked fine.
I have to confess, I haven't had an opportunity to review them myself, so maybe we'll just save that approval for the next meeting, if that's all right, just so I can check them out.
Mr. Chair,
Okay.
you're talking about, sorry, I had a phone call I had to take. You're talking about the minutes.
For April and August.
Yes. I would recommend. I don't think, did we see May? I don't remember seeing it, unless that was from the previous meeting.
I was just reading off the agenda. I knew that David had sent later minutes, but I wasn't, at the time, I wasn't sure that it was April.
Let's get them in the packet for next meeting. If that works for everybody, get all of them and just approve them.
Thank you.
That sounds perfect, David. Thank you. So let's move on to the update on the revolving loan fund project. Abby and David, I know you've been working on that with Georgia. Would either of you like to speak to that?
Definitely. I think Abby's muted. There you go.
Yeah, sorry. I do want to speak to it. Do you want me to start, David, or do you
Yeah,
want to
Abby,
start?
go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so what we did is we got together, Georgia, David and I, and we kind of talked through and did a bunch of research on different options of, I think our thought here was we wanted to see if we could develop some sort of program to help those who want to do some sort of exterior renovation that would benefit the community to their homes. But a lot of these people, it's not necessarily the first thought of what they think to do, because from an affordability standpoint, usually it's expensive, or if people do obviously decide to fund these types of things, it's not a priority. So we want to do a program to help those who might not necessarily make a historical preservation part of their, whatever they're doing to their home. And so we did a little bit of research on, there's a bunch of different communities that have done similar programs and have different programs in place. And so we got a lot of detail, like understanding a couple of other towns, Arlington, Hingham, Brookline, towns where all of these towns have very similar to us. They have a historic commission, they have their planning board is really involved. And so we were trying to figure out like what would be the best fit for us. I think one of the things is a lot of the communities that we saw, they might have different ways that they fund these types of programs, but based on the research that we looked at, we thought the idea that would be most effective is for us to partner with one of our local banks. So that being said, that part is still kind of underway. David and I are going to meet with a couple of the banks. I did speak to somebody from Pacific National. She definitely understood like what we're looking to do. We just need to have another meeting with them in person to talk a little bit through it. But I think the thought is we would partner with a local bank to set up some sort of kind of micro loan program for low and moderate income individuals. And I think part of our thought with that is banks, depending on the bank, but all banks are bound by the Community Reinvestment Act. And so they have to demonstrate their commitment to the communities in which they are. And a big piece of this is obviously providing access to funding for those who are low and moderate income individuals. So I guess by the nature of that, banks have that kind of mandate for them. Each bank has different plans of how they do this. But from an attractiveness standpoint of like, why would a bank want to do this? It would help them meet their CRA requirement. And I think based on, just some of our preliminary discussions, we know that, Cape Cod 5 does a lot of local programs. So they might be really open to it because they've done different things. As I said, when I spoke to the person from Pacific National, it sounded like something that they definitely might want to consider. But what our thought is, we're going to talk to the 4 banks, Hingham, Pacific National, and Rockland Trust, Nantucket Bank, to see if any of them are interested in that program. So that's kind of part of our next step. Also, Georgia met with Mary Bergman and talked with her from the NPT, the Preservation Trust. And the good news was they had been thinking about something similar. So they definitely were on board with the concept. It's something that they've been talking about. I think, and I put this as a couple of like topics of things that we still need to follow up on, is they had talked about just kind of like general renovation. So not necessarily exterior versus interior. So I think that would be part of like what we need to figure out. I think the reason why that matters is there are some like technical things we need to figure out with if we're doing easements, if it's exterior and interior, obviously it's a little more complicated. If we're doing an easement, is it, we're looking to make it temporary as opposed to a permanent easement. And then I think our thought is if it's a temporary easement, we need to figure out if the town would need to accept it or not. So that's, again, that's another topic that we're still figuring out, trying to like learn more about that. But I think the good news is the Preservation Trust definitely was supportive of it. And when we were talking about the easement, I think part of our thought was that there would be some sort of annual inspection so that if someone does a renovation, we want to at least make sure that, there's some sort of check-in. So it's not just like a one and done and then they can do whatever they want. We want to come back and see. And we wouldn't put that burden on the bank, but we might make it as part of us as the historical commission to to do the annual inspection, or is MPT doing it? Again, we need to figure out like those semantics, but I think our thought is we do want that level of, you know, monitoring, just to make sure that if someone makes a reservation, like that they're keeping it up, that it doesn't immediately like fall apart or they dismantle it, whatever. Not that we think anyone would do that, but we do think we need to have some sort of guardrails in play. And what else? David, did I miss anything? Oh, I think we were going to, Mary had suggested we talk to an entity called Housing Assistance Cape Cod. So I think that's one of our follow-ups. And then another aspect that we're looking to do is thinking about developing like a list of recommended contractors who might, not that we're going to like steer people, but we could say like, hey, if you're looking to do preservation work, these are contractors we've worked with before. And so looking to develop that kind of like list of people who'd be willing to do those types of projects and may or may not offer different kind of pricing. So again, that's something we just need to explore. I think the thought was, you know, we'd like to see if we could have a couple of people we could recommend that this is something that they feel passionate about and that they would want to participate in this type of project. So again, a lot of this work is ongoing, but we wanted to give everybody an update. And so David, did I miss anything?
No, you covered everything. I think, I guess in, you know, the summary is that, you know, Abby and I are planning to meet with banks. And that's kind of our next step. You know, once we have a partnership with a local bank, I think it'll put us in a position where things will happen a little quicker. You know, we need to build out an application. We need to, you know, find administrators, whether that be through NPT or at the bank, to review applications. Obviously, the bank is going to determine creditworthiness and things like that. So I really think it kind of hinges on the partnership with the bank. And once we have the commitment there, we just need to figure out how to kind of administer the funds and oversee the project. So that's the update there. If I'd be happy to hear from other commissioners if they have questions or comments or ideas. So thanks, Abby, for the summary.
Thank you both. Any commissioners have questions?
So I assume this is going to be like a low interest loan of some sort. And does the bank sort of take the hit on that? Is that, you know, because it's below their normal lending rate? I mean,
Yeah.
So yeah,
Abby, go ahead.
what we're going to learn more, I think, once we talk to the banks. But yes, Mickey, that's the idea. It would be a low interest loan, and that the bank would be willing to do that because it would be meeting those kind of CRA commitments, which is traditional in different banks where they might be willing to do those types of programs where, you know, obviously they can offset that with a different type of product or program for a different community that is not necessarily LMI.
Okay.
Which is like the rest of Nantucket.
I have some questions, comments. So yeah, that's interesting. You know, the Arlington model, they raised a fund, so it became like a revolving fund. So this, but of course, it's much better if you don't have to raise the fund, as long as the people who, I mean, the purpose is to encourage people to correct their homes. So instead of saying, oh, you know, we can't afford to replace this balustrade, that's very expensive to do and it's on the top of the house, but maybe they would consider actually doing that instead of asking the HCC to let them not do it. I just wonder if the people who have the projects that need to be done are going to qualify for the low income. I know there are lots, but I just put that out there as a question. And then the other comment I have is I would just be careful if you find that the easement is really complicating it. I know we have a lot of programs on Nantucket that require easements, but they're getting grants, and this is a loan. So the person is paying it back. And they're smaller projects, right? These are like porches and gutters and fences and balustrades and other embellishments of historic homes. And They're very visible. I just wonder if you find, I guess I would just say, if you find that the easement really deters people from applying, I don't know, does the Arlington program require an easement?
Well, I think that's one of our questions. I think we're not sure if it really will require an easement or not. I was looking at the notes. I don't think the Arlington program, they initially raised their funds with the federal, the block grant program.
Community Development Block Grant.
Yeah, they don't have an easement, but what some of the other communities did is they have, one of them, they had them like sign some sort of like agreement,
Mhm.
some sort of contract. I think our concern with it was we could do that, but then we like have no way to enforce it. But we could do that in like a symbolic way of, hey, you have to have this annual inspection and you agree to do it. But I think the thing is, but they would already have the money, so it really wouldn't matter if they didn't do it. But that was something that some of the other communities did. And but yes, I mean, I think we were thinking, David, like 50,000 would be our max, so it is smaller. But I think that was one of the things that we want to look at, is we don't even know if we necessarily need an easement. But I think that the difference with the revolving fund is they had used the block grant to start it, which we I think we weren't able to, so that's why we wouldn't necessarily use the same model as them. But theirs is relatively simple. When you look through their data, it takes like 2 months to do it, to get the funding. So it's not super complicated in Arlington.
Yeah, I just would encourage to keep a focus on, this is about small loans to encourage these little projects that are, and to make it easy. And if having an easement starts to feel very heavy and starts to deter people, it might be working against you more than it's helping you, is just my comment to think about.
Yeah, no, and we definitely hear that. That's why I think we wanted to figure out, and I think that was part of George's conversation with Mary, is like, well, we don't even know if we necessarily need it, because if this is some sort of temporary thing, I think the understanding was like, well, easements are really a permanent thing, which is why you would need to go through the work. You have to go to the town. But if this is something else, I think the thought was it may not be something, and maybe we just make it, something similar, or maybe it's some sort of agreement, something like that. And we just say, hey, we're going to be inspecting your house. I don't know. But I think that I agree. I think what our thought was, we wanted to make it as easy as possible for people to do. And so I think another piece, David, that we forgot to mention is like, we wanted to make sure we made it as easy as possible on the town. I think our thought was we would do some sort of like annual update and let them know, like, these are the projects we're doing, but more of not burdening the town with any of the administrative work, that we would take it on between, if we do a piece, if MPT did a piece, and then the bank, and we would just make sure to just do some sort of annual like report and let them know, like, hey, these are the types of projects we did, and really just inform. And as Holly mentioned earlier, just kind of educate people, like, hey, this is what's going on. And then if people don't know about the program, we would do some sort of outreach as well. I think that was, I forgot to mention that, David. I think that was something that Mary mentioned as well, that would be important, is how we do the outreach to make sure people know about the program to begin with.
Yeah, and I think the partnership with NPT is obviously very important too. So,
Holly, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious on how Arlington, Hingham, and Brookline intertwine the requirements of the revolving loan fund if it's handled through their historical commission, and how, say somebody comes into the HDC. I'll give you an example. Say somebody comes in, windows are a biggest thing that I see, that people want to work on their house, but they don't have the money. So there's an older person that has a historic house, and oh my gosh, all my windows need to be replaced, but they're TDL. They're either TDL or they're actually original TDL to the house. The last thing we want is, somebody to be, I can't afford this, and so they're wanting to do something either completely just any. I'm trying to figure out loud how somebody coming in and saying, hey, I have a 1920s bungalow and I have these windows I need to replace, and I'm gonna apply for this loan through the historical commission, through the this funding process with the bank. They obviously need to get a COA from the HDC. They need to get that approval. So I'm just curious on how, instead of reinventing the wheel, how these other communities handle that process, and if that's something that you've looked into yet, and if not, I would love to see that happen. That's my comment, and thank you for working on this. This is great.
Yeah, the local historical commissions in, I think, all three communities are very involved. From the application process, obviously COA through the HDC. And so I think modeling it after that, obviously that requires us to have some sort of interfacing with the HDC so that they're not blindsided by this project that we're doing. But I don't think that would be too complicated. We could write them a letter and let them know what we're up to, or, you know, even go on to the listserv and try and engage other communities about, you know, how that symbiotic relationship works.
Yeah, and Holly, just for some of the specifics, like the example in Arlington, anybody, like, they have to apply, whoever's applying, it has to be property that's already in one of the historic district, and it's cataloged in the historical commission surveys. But then what happens is they have, because it's a revolving loan fund, they have representatives from, you know, historical commission and their HDC, if you will, as part of the fund. They have like a fund commission, and they have regular meetings where they would review an application, but you would have someone from those different, like those key stakeholders would be on that meeting. They would all review the application together. And then what happens is they forward those kind of vetted applications to their board of selectmen, and their board of selectmen approves it. And then once they get the approval from the board of selectmen, then they can sign the closing papers and get that loan. So that's just like the example of Arlington. As David mentioned, the other communities are similar, where it is kind of like this cross-functional group, if you will, that reviews the applications. And then once everyone is kind of on board or in agreement, then like a approved application, if you will, then they go forward with the funding piece. So that could be something like, we could set up a subcommittee or something like that. That would be, I would recommend, with those different representatives from the different groups. I know in one of the towns, I think the treasurer from the town is the one who does the maintenance of the fund. So similarly, that's how, like, you have someone from the town, you have someone from the HCC, you have someone from the historical commission. They're all kind of part of that group, if you will. Does that make sense?
So I was imagining that the revolving loan fund would just be the financial relief to qualified applicants. Otherwise, it seems like you would go through all the regular channels of the work that you'd be doing. So, you know, it'd mean going through the HDC and the billing department and all of that. So, I mean, just how involved do we, or does the loan get with any of that other than just the funding aspect? Do we, I mean, is it really any more than about providing the funds?
So, I mean, I guess it depends. If you set up a separate revolving loan fund, then in the cases where they did involve all of those other stakeholders. So, I mean, but I think it could be more, it depends. It's like, it's advisory versus like having them actively involved. But even with Arlington, they have a revolving loan fund, but they still had representatives from those different areas. Like when we looked at it, we thought, we don't necessarily think our select board would have to approve the applications, because they would be going, like, if we're the ones facilitating the loan program with the bank, then I don't think you'd necessarily need that level of involvement. But I think but as we said, maybe the HDC is just part of the like awareness and education as opposed to having to be the approvers on the application itself. So I think we can figure that part out, but David, isn't that your thought that like it really kind of depends on
Yeah.
how we're looking to fund it?
It really depends on our partners in this. It depends on NPT and what role they can play. And it depends on the bank and what role they can play. I mean, we need to generate some sort of application. We need to have experts reviewing it, obviously of the financial component. But I don't think that we need too much from the HDC, kind of like Angus was saying. I mean, really, once we get them the funds in this program off the ground, hopefully we have systems in place with our partners to keep the process going, to, you know, so that more applicants are coming in and that the funds are obviously returned to the bank, and obviously have enough on hand to potentially have multiple projects ongoing. So really, I think, you know, what we'll have for the commission at the next meeting is the outcomes of those meetings with the banks, as well as, you know, obviously another follow-up conversation with Mary at NPT. And then we'll, I think, have a much better idea of what this program looks like on Nantucket.
I'm curious about the bank aspect because, you know, Pacific National feels local, but it's Bank of America. And so I'll be curious at our next meeting to see, you know, how do they meet their needs to do local projects? Is that where their brick and mortar banks are, or, you know, is Bank of America going to be any more or less, you know, offering local benefits than a Hingham or a Cape Cod or Nantucket bank? So I look forward to hearing about that.
Yeah, each bank has a score on record with how well they meet that requirement, and I think Pacific is the worst.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the only benefit theoretically from Pacific is that because it's such a large bank, they might be more flexible with making unprofitable loans because it's such a large organization. But to your point, Angus, I think when we were thinking of like who might be a really good community partner, I think we were thinking more along the lines of Cape Cod 5 or Hingham, because they are very local and they do a lot of work in the community. But we just wanted to do our due diligence and talk to all of them and see what they could offer, because I think pricing wise, maybe Bank of America, Pacific National can offer a better rate, but we'd have to see. So that's why David and I are definitely going to see once we talk to them.
Great. Well, thank you both.
I have a question about, you know, maybe this is more getting into the details later on, but, you know, would there be a type of a project that qualifies for this loan? Is, you know, some may and some may not. For instance, if you're doing the front of your house that's very visible from a public way, it does benefit the community to see that improvement. But if, for instance, you're re-shingling the back of your garage, which no one will see, does that qualify for this kind of a loan?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that'll be up to us. And that was one of the takeaways we had is, you know, exterior, is it just any exterior? Is it, you know, as you're saying, kind of community facing? I think in the other communities, they didn't necessarily get into that nuance. They really just said, is it in a historic district? And then they said if it was, then whatever is exterior in that district, they counted it. But I mean, I think that's a good question if we necessarily like wanted to, because to your point, if people are just like, okay, I'm gonna renovate my garage and no one sees it, like, is that the best use of our resources? So I think that's a fair point. And as David said, I think once we have an understanding of the bank piece, and then I think that might be something we talk about with MPT, just get their thoughts. But I think for simplicity's sake, like I said, Arlington, they just said, oh, it has to be in the historic district. And, you know, they didn't get that specific.
Yeah, Nikki, I think that's a really good question. I think it'll be dependent on the types of applications that we start to receive. And hopefully we do receive of the various applications, someone for the front, you know, street facing side, and maybe some for, you know, stuff that doesn't, you know, really involve what the public sees. So I think that's an interesting conversation but that's more of a conversation of preservation and public benefit. And I think it's an interesting one. So I think that once this commission is able to, hopefully in partnership with NPT, develop this application, then I think we can kind of peel back the onion a little bit and get into those details. So that's what I think we really look forward to discussing with you guys.
Thank you, Mickey. Yeah, I would imagine that this is set up as a preservation tool. And, whether it's the visible or non-visible part of the historic structure, it's still preservation. So seems like it would be, consistent with any part of the structure, whether it's visible or not, but we'll learn more. Thank you all. The next thing on our agenda is
Mr. Chair. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to let everybody know that NPT is actually zoomed in with us. They're here. So if they're able to.
thank you for joining, Mary and Rita.
Thanks. Yeah, sorry we're late.
That's all right. We were just finishing up our discussion about the revolving loan fund. We got an update from Abby and David. Is there anything that you all wanted to add to that before we move on to the next thing?
No, just that I was happy to talk to George about it, and we're looking forward to seeing how that unfolds and what we can learn from other towns.
Same here. All right. So let's go on to protecting and maintaining Brant Point Light and Great Point Light. Hillary, can you give us an update on any of that?
Yeah, thank you, Angus. So Angus and I have continued to work. We haven't done as much work as we had maybe would have liked to in a month, but it's been a busy month. But we've certainly continued to focus on the exploration of how to nominate Great Point Light for listing on the National Register. And the feedback and what we've learned is that the CLG opinion nomination fund should take the form of an inventory fund. So that's good to know. And there's also preliminary research. Can I share my screen? Oh, great. Thank you. Great. So this is this terrific bulletin, which I'm sure you guys are all familiar with. It's bulletin number 15 from the National Park Service, how to apply the criteria for the National Register. And it outlines what the criteria are. Just a reminder, Great Point Light is not part of our period of significance, so it can't be part of, it can't be an individually significant, it can't be a contributing structure in our National Historic Monument. It needs to be individually significant on its own. And that determination is made by the Park Service and also informed by the Massachusetts Historical Commission and also by us. So the decision is A, B, C, or D as far as its criteria. Associated with events, associated with lives of persons significant in the past, embody distinctive characteristics of a type or the work of a master, that's architectural, or yielded or likely to yield information important in prehistory, that's archaeology. So I think for this structure, we're probably looking at B, associated with the lives of persons significant in our past, especially at the state level. And then I also wanted to share, if I can get this out of the way. Yeah. So just some reminders. I mean, there are people who remember all of this, but the second Great Point Light fell in 1984. And then it was reconstructed by 1987. With basically a laser focus from Senator Edward Kennedy, and the dedication of it was a huge event on Nantucket. And then in fact, they had a rededication in 2011 for the 25th anniversary. So it's now 37 years old. And Kennedy came, Ted Kennedy came to the original dedication and gave a speech quoting Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, "This massive masonry, this pillar of fire by night, this beautiful structure that is our own Great Point Lighthouse is indeed and always will be alive and well." And there's just wonderful pictures of him coming to Nantucket. Here he is when they were building it. And, you know, many of the people who built it are, I mean, people involved in that are alive. There are people around the island who have stones from the original lighthouse. So it's just a very cool project as far as the communication of memory that's resident in people who are still alive and remember the event, and transferring that, imbuing the building with that, and remembering it not as a very old lighthouse, but as a reconstructed lighthouse that's memorable in its own right because of its association with Ted Kennedy. So I think this is the avenue to pursue. Here's pictures. Here he is with Elsie Greeter. I don't know, Holly, you probably know who this is behind Elsie, but is that James? I don't know who that is. Anyway, there are people who know all these people who were at this event. It was a very cool event. There was a massive island-wide picnic and fireworks when they dedicated it. I think it's just going to be a really, really cool story to tell. And Kennedy spoke about it all the time. Here's the old lighthouse and the new lighthouse. So I guess we just want comments and you know, the okay from this commission that you want to continue to pursue creation of an inventory form, which would, you know, be reviewed by everyone and make the up or down as far as whether or not you want to have an opinion if it's significant, and forward that requests for confirmation to the MHC would be the process. Ooh.
I personally think that's a great way to pursue this, to protect Great Point. I can say that through Hillary's help and through, I'm currently president of the Wisconsin Trust, and thanks to a CPC grant and fundraising by the trust, we are currently restoring phase 2 restoration of the Sanctity Head Lighthouse. This has been done by the International Chimney Company, who did the move 15 years ago of Sanctity Head Lighthouse, and they're coming back to, it's very, very interesting what they're doing up there. But one of their leaders and head guy is named Tyler Finkel, and he will be here next weekend, and he's got a few days. And through Hillary, myself, and the trustees of the reservation, we have made a contact between Tyler Finkel and Diane Lang, who is the current head of the trustees of the reservation. And they are going to meet, and she is going to allow Tyler to do a free estimate of what repairs are needed and what it will cost to not restore, but renovate, I guess, the current Great Point Lighthouse. As I understand it, they don't let anybody in anymore because the flooding and the mildew and the mold is bad. So that's going to happen next week, and I can report back on that. I know we're talking about Great Point now, but we would love to have Tyler be able to have access to Brant Point as well. And I don't have a contact there. The whole idea would just be that he could look and make, as I say, a free assessment of what needs to be done and how it can be done. And if there's anybody, Holly, I know you've spoken to the Coast Guard about this. I don't know who to contact in the Coast Guard, but anyway, that's the next lighthouse. But I'm totally in favor of applying for the Great Point Lighthouse to be on the National Register for Historic Places. And I'm totally in favor of any kind of restoration information we can get through the trustees and whoever else is involved with or would be involved with this work on Great Point.
Thank you, Clement. Other commissioners?
Oh, I have one thing I need to add. Sorry, I forgot to mention, and it was a big forget, which is that, you know, the Coast Guard owns that structure, so they need to be in favor. We need to figure out exactly what the Coast Guard, they have a head of preservation. Holly, have you spoken with the head of the person responsible for preservation at the Coast Guard?
Nope.
No.
Not had time.
Right. So what I'd like to do, if this commission gives me permission, is ask the right people at the MHC to liaise with their contact at the Coast Guard. And just, you know, we don't want to go down this path and not have talked to the Coast Guard about Great Point Light. I know Holly is covering Brant Point when she has time, so would that be okay?
Let me check with the commission. I would imagine everyone is in favor, but what say ye all?
No, absolutely.
Commissioner, yes.
I thought, as I understood it, that the Coast Guard was only responsible for the the light itself, and not the structure. And
well, no, in the case of the ones of Sanctity, that's true, because they know they de-accession the structure. But in the case of Great Point and Brant Point, they own the beacon, they own the structure. Now, whether or not they care about the structure, what they care about is the light from a military and navigation perspective. But there isn't anybody else who is responsible. They've given permission in the past to the trustees as far as Great Point for painting, and the trustees have in the past, you know, painted and patched. But now the trustees have let that agreement lapse because they feel that the structure cannot be maintained effectively in that way, because it actually needs structural work, which is something the Coast Guard has to do or get somebody else. The Coast Guard has to get somebody else.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, sure. I know it's complicated, a lot of different agencies. Sorry, Abby, did you have a question?
Well, I agree with Clement. Like, I think it's a great idea. I was wondering, and I think Holly had brought this up at a previous meeting, that we might want to put together some sort of, like, I don't know if it's a document, presentation, something, so that we can educate people on like what we're looking to do and then who would be doing what. But I think prior to us like saying we're going to apply, I think it would be good to socialize that with people so they understand, like, if we are applying, like what we're looking to do, because I think it'll be a lot more effective of like getting support if we socialize it with people and then we say our next step is we're looking to do this, rather than doing it and telling them afterward. But that was just, I think, my thought of, like, I agree with you, Holly. We've talked about education. I think it'd just be really helpful people understand. I think, Hillary, it seems like you guys have a lot of great stuff that would be easy to put into some sort of document of like, this is why it's important. You could talk about like, we are thinking of, you know, preserving it because of this, what you said, the historic, like, what was it? The form B, the reason B, like that's the reason why we're looking to preserve it. I just think that making sure we socialize it with people would go a long way, but that's just my 2 cents.
Holly, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, on that point what Abby brought up, thank you. Yes, I do think that that is very important to, because at the end of the day, if this does get the proper, you know, approval process, the select board's going to have to, and our town, you know, at B needs to sign off on anything that goes through that process. So I think the biggest thing is to not necessarily the structure, preservation of the structure itself, because obviously it's not significant. It's the association and the setting of what that place is to Nantucket in general, not only from our whaling era, but obviously with just the overall setting and the association with those people that Hillary brought up. So that's where the significance and the importance is, not necessarily this replica structure that technically really isn't a replica to begin with. If you really look at the characteristics from the original one that fell down in 1984 to what was constructed. So education, yes, people need to know, well, why are you all doing this and what would be the reason for it? I think that's very, very important for this community to look at. And yes, one of our 3 lighthouses that we hold near and dear to our character overall as a National Historic Landmark. So thank you.
Well, Hillary, you look like you're about to say something.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I mean, yeah, I'm trying to help the commission. So I think that is, I mean, that's what this commission does, is participate in the National Register program and nominate structures. And, I've just tried to work in the background to figure out what would be the right way to nominate this and what contributes to its significance. And I've done that. And then I'm going to give this information to you guys, because I'm just a friend of the commission at this point and happy to be that. So, however you want to progress it, I support that. And just keep in mind that we've been having this discussion for a while and we were told not to work on it. So, we were told that the town didn't want to spend any time on it. So now, maybe if Holly wanted to bring it up, they would want to hear about it. I think that would be great.
Well, Hillary, why don't you send over what you have, and I can work to start creating like some sort of presentation, and I can circulate it with the commissioners. And then Holly, when you feel comfortable, then we can figure out like maybe what would be the next step of how we approach the town. If everybody thinks that makes sense, I'm happy to like take the lead on that if people think that works.
What do the other commissioners think?
I think Clement, we got to start wherever we can. So I'm very appreciative of Hillary for putting together all this information. And if Abby can put together the package, I think that would be a great vehicle for that. Most immediately, I would like to know who the head of preservation of the Coast Guard. I didn't even know there was one. And since I now know that, well, I assume that the trustees, Diane, can still let Tyler Finkel into the structure without Coast Guard approval, but we can't do anything, obviously, at Brant Point without Coast Guard approval, and maybe not even at the Great Point. So,
it sounds like Holly has the contact. She just doesn't have the bandwidth to reach out. So, Holly, maybe you could share that with.
If you could share that with me, Holly, that would be great. And I'm not trying to go around anybody's back, but I think this would be so important that since this company is here now and available to do an assessment, that it would, as we all know, most of the expense of coming over here is housing and transportation. So once they're here, if they could do an assessment, and I'm not sure if there are other people that even do this kind of work on lighthouses, but I know they do. And I know that Wisconsin Trust trusts them and they do a fabulous job. So I just find the expedience of, since they're here, I would like to have Tyler Finkel have access to both lighthouses, but that requires someone greater than me. And that would be you, Holly. So, and I love Abby's approach to nominating making an application for the Great Point to be on the National Registry. That requires all the education that she was talking about. But just for me and my immediate purposes, if you'll share that with me, then I can share it with Tyler. Hopefully they can make some kind of arrangement. I'm not trying to be the monkey in the middle on this. I just want to make the contact.
I think that makes sense, Clement.
And I don't want Holly to feel like she's spending any time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr.
Holly,
Chair.
we don't want you to get in trouble, so we'll
Thank
do
you.
the work. We'll
Thank
just, you could just send a couple of emails with context, right, Clement? And we'll do all the heavy lifting.
Well, that's, yes, exactly, Abby. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, through you, I just wanted to mention that Clement brought up this concept of preservation officer, if you will. So each branch, this is probably something that many people know, but each branch of the federal government has a quote unquote preservation officer within each branch. Doesn't necessarily mean that they are fluent in preservation, but they are the ones that are charged under the National Historic Preservation Act to basically be the one, if anything needs to, be discussed on that aspect. So yeah, that's something that's pretty interesting, that each branch has its own preservation officer.
And so you have that person's contact information you
I
can
have
share.
a contact that I've been told is the person to talk to, at least for these lighthouses. Whether that's the preservation officer or I have no idea. The person I spoke to was a low man on the totem pole and said this person is above my pay grade and would be able to help you. So we'll go from there. I'll provide that, Clement.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Mickey or David, do you have anything to add? David, please go ahead.
Yeah, just on, should we write a letter to the select board and let them know what we're up to? Just that we're considering this and we might do it. And even though they said not to do it, that we're going to do it anyway.
I have similar thoughts, Mickey.
If you want to follow up on that point, I have a different question.
Oh, no, please go ahead, Mickey. I'll circle back.
Okay, so
I'll just say that I agree with Angus. We're not trying to obfuscate and hide this idea. We're just trying to help out. So, we've sort of been burned occasionally for just trying to help out. So I think a letter is great. Great idea.
Yeah, and I think as long as the letter is very clear that we aren't making Holly do the work, right? Like we can say Holly's just facilitating some of the conversations, but that like we as the commission are taking on any of the research, et cetera. So they understand that, like, because I think my understanding of the comment from the town was they didn't want town resources being used to do this. So I think as long as the letter is very clear that like, we still feel that's important. We heard you, we're not making the town do this. So we as the commission are doing the research. And then when we're comfortable, we will engage the town to do what the town needs to do. But something like that, just so they understand, like we got your message. We're not trying to use town resources to do what research we're doing,
Thanks, Abby. Mary, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Angus. Hold on, let me put my little hand down here. I think too that you have new information now. You're able to offer something, and you have this great crew that's here on island. So I wonder if that is a way to approach it. These people are, they're the leaders in the country for this kind of work, and they're here in the Sconset Trust via the CPC, right, Clement? So this is something that has already been funded by public money, and already, maybe just pointing that out, that you're hoping to piggyback off of this CPC funded project.
Right. And I think the timing is just so fortuitous, and it's generous of Fiscal to offer to extend to our other historic resources here, at least with it. Brant Point being historic and the significance of Great Point. And so I think sharing a name and a number is not going to be draining the town of very many resources. I personally think that since in Hillary, if this is something that you're willing to do, since you've done all the research so far, if it makes sense for you to do a summary of what your findings are and next steps, and we share it with the select board, it's probably a good idea if they aren't already aware that that's what our one of our objectives is, and we can share that with them.
Thanks, Angus. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And in a past meeting, we had decided to send a letter, and I offered to draft the letter, and I hadn't, just because I didn't know what the letter would say. I mean, I had to do more research, and I don't want to over-represent my research. It's not very deep, but it's certainly, I feel very confident that I can say to this commission that Kennedy's involvement is significant. He was very closely associated during his lifetime with this lighthouse. It's been rededicated after 25 years. So it's just very clear the angle to go. And that was something that we didn't know and we had to figure out. And the other thing that is very clear is that I didn't know, to make this nomination, do we actually have to go through the effort of preparing the whole nomination? I didn't know what the MHC wanted, and there wasn't anything in writing. And what I know now, and now everybody knows, is that they do expect an inventory form. So anyway, now we know exactly what we have to do. So now we can write the letter, and I hope that everybody will be thrilled. It's a wonderful contribution that this commission can make, and it is part of what this commission is supposed to be doing. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be a big deal. We'll have a letter. It'll go to the select board from the chair, and I think as long as Holly also thinks that's a good idea, then that's what we should do. Or you should do. I'll help.
Thank you. Thank you so much. What's the temperature of the rest of the commission to just send a letter to the select board, give them an update on what we're doing, and we can certainly copy the town and let them know that we're not asking anything of them. This is just an update.
I agree wholeheartedly. It's a great step. Thank you. Thank you, Hillary, for your environment and the commission.
Mickey?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea too. The only other thing I wanted to ask about, and this is probably more to Hillary, is that you had brought up on the screen the sort of the 4 points of relevancy, I guess, A, B, C, and D. And we're going with B, I think, which was the Ted Kennedy route. Are there some parts of the others that we can also piggyback onto? I mean, it seems like it's a pretty relevant structure.
Yeah.
Otherwise.
Yeah, I actually think the question of the site, I think when the inventory is prepared, it should include a lot of information about the site. Because the site is, I think what we'll find, I mean, again, we can't say anything until we have research and everybody has had a chance to evaluate it and come to an agreement. But we could potentially include in the letter, in the eligibility opinion request form, that the site qualifies under A. And that's something we would have to substantiate. Because there's been a lighthouse there, for centuries. And there's lovely, there's lovely letters from and journals from the people who live there about the experience of living out at that location.
Yeah.
Folks, I need to be somewhere at 11:15. I'm so sorry, but I thank you for letting me work on this project. I'm really passionate about it, and I'm so happy to support this commission in that regard. And I gotta run, but I will follow up with all of you, and certainly, Holly, please follow up with, call me anytime to discuss anything that you think I should be considering or worried about or thinking about. Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you,
Thank
Hillary.
you all. Bye.
Thank you, Hillary.
Bye.
David, are you good with a letter just being sent to the select board with the town being copied? Great. Abby?
Yes. Are we going to review the letter before it goes out?
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
then I'm good with that.
I don't know, is that something that we can do outside of the meeting, or we can just bring it to the next meeting? There's no hurry with it. Nothing's going to happen with this immediately. So we can review that in the next meeting.
Yeah, I don't know, Holly, are we allowed to like work on a letter?
Really
outside
and
of-
truly, if it's a letter that the commission is going to be endorsing, say the chair to send, a draft should be provided to everybody to review, and then it should be shown up on the screen at the next meeting for anybody to say, hey, could you add this or that, whatever, and then obviously have a motion on that letter. That's the path that I would recommend.
I think that's perfect, Holly. Let's plan on doing that.
All right,
So if there aren't any other comments, let's go on to the next thing on the agenda. I got so it's the LED streetlights, and I heard from Gail Walker. Unfortunately, she was not well this week, so she's not able to join. And I'm wondering, did Holly, did that information get to Lauren? I was half expecting for Lauren to go ahead and do her
Okay.
presentation and save Gail for a future meeting, but where are we with Lauren?
So I touched base with her this morning just to say, hey, here's the link. And she actually said she heard about Gail. Gail actually contacted her directly to say that she was not going to be here. So it sounded like that they wanted to have this joint meeting with you all together. And so Lauren wasn't really planning on attending separately.
Okay.
So it sounds like October for both of them, if that's okay with the commission, obviously. I can make just a brief thing that I have been a little bit involved with the report that she's been working on with Tanko. They've come back to give a initial report. They're going to come back with some additional information, but looking at basically the features, and obviously having a low Kelvin. And I will obviously bring up another a point of topic that I think is relevant. So this is where I'm going to do a stretch on the agenda. But some of you may have known that there was an application before the HTC on lights at the Pacific National Bank, our individually significant brownstone structure. And it went before the commission for the third time with comments from HSAB as well as staff, and it was denied. And because pretty much it was, I think they upheld it appropriately. It was going to be 3,000 Kelvin, I think even plus than that. I don't know what that means that Bank of America is going to do, but they were not responsive to this commission and this National Historic Landmark District. So my whole take on that is, here's the town going through this report, this initiative to look at our street lightings that are owned by the town, have them LED, but also have them a Kelvin that's appropriate to the National Historic Landmark, and having an outright community, or excuse me, an organization like Bank of America, who's just looking at their places across their portfolio in the country, not really understanding Nantucket, and saying this is just what we're going to do, is important. That they weren't going to just approve something that was going to be incongruent with what the initiatives of town are doing. It's kind of a sidebar, but I know that Lauren is happy to speak with the commission and get your input on these street lightings, which are so very important. So I do think having them both together at a joint meeting with you all is more important.
Thank you, Holly. It is it's certainly a multifaceted topic, and they'll cover separate parts of that. So I think that it's probably good that they come together and present together, and that'll be more comprehensive. And
Yes.
That's really good news about the denial of the application. It was clearly a lack of understanding of our setting and so forth. It's not your typical Bank of America. So that's certainly good news. Next thing is under discussion is the HDC Advisory Committee and the committees and ongoing function of HDC.
I guess, can I just, I'm sorry, I circle back to the last topic. I'm here.
I apologize. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's all right. I just want a quick question. the light that's the sort of test light that's on Main Street is for the looking at the color and the intensity. Is that on Main Street or is it actually on Federal Street? Is it?
Are we talking about the one in front of Town Pool
Yes.
Pool on Main Street.
on Main Street?
Because there's one, I drove by it. I've been away, of course, and I'm here now, and I drove by it, and there's an old, there's a really old lamp in front of Town Pool on Main Street. But I didn't see a new one there. Maybe I just didn't look
No,
closely enough.
No, it is the old lamp. It's the lighting. It's the quality and the color of the light that's in the old lamp.
So it's
And the frosted glass globe.
And it's a
Okay.
frosted glass globe.
all right. So I'll see that clearly enough. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, that's the only question I have when I finally drove by at night is that, and what I'm thrilled with, I guess, is when every street light, because now there's just a hodgepodge of different lights, it looks terrible.
Mhm.
But if everyone is the same wattage and intensity, is it going to turn out to be too bright? And as I recall, these are able to be on dimmers. So I think once they are all in place, and then we could have kind of a joint look at them and say, what dimming should they all be? Because they should all be at the same level. And I think that would be great. You don't want it to be too intense down there, the light, but if they're all on dimmers, then terrific.
Yeah,
Hey.
I agree,
Mhm.
Clement. I think that was my thought because I saw the light. I think that I just wanted to, and Mickey, I think you brought this up at the last meeting. We just wanted to make sure that it's like consistent and aligned like with the community. So I think that's great if there's dimmers or whatever, because I felt like I just saw the one light and it seemed really bright. So if it's like maybe a little dimmer and maybe whatever they're doing with the bank has more lights, as long as it's not crazy. But I think it would look nice if it's not super, super bright, because I think what also surprised me is maybe before I saw the light, I thought it's darker in that area, but then when I was walking around, it didn't seem super dark. So I don't think the light needs to be at like 100% intensity. And again, that's just my 2 cents.
I think it'll be helpful when Lauren can give us more information about it. Right now, I think it's going to be more speculation. Because I don't know, right now, is that light at 25% or 0% or anyway, but I think Lauren will be able to give us more insight on that. Has anyone been following the latest with the advisory boards and select board meeting? And there was a suggestion of different ways of aiding the HDC with advisory groups, and more neighborhoods were mentioned other than the existing advisory boards. There was a suggestion of other groups advising, like the Nantucket Historical Commission. And so I just wanted to get anybody's feedback on that.
I'm curious. I know that this came up, having just read the minutes for last Tuesday's meeting. So I'm sure you were there, Holly. How did that discussion go with the HDC?
There's been multiple HDC meetings, so bear with my brain, but this past week was just a discussion on how the select board meeting was the previous week. I was in attendance at that select board meeting. Pretty much they, wanted to hear what HDC was looking for. Mr. Pohl, the chair, had written a letter for the select board that they received that morning. So obviously the HDC approved it the night before. It was provided to them that morning. I actually did get up and speak just briefly on the fact that, we do have staff, but B, that, it's important to emphasize Mr. Ray's, Mr. Pohl's letter and basically saying that they want to have the sign advisory council reconstituted. That's only been the topic of conversation, was the sign advisory council. Nothing else at the moment.
So we're more familiar these days with the HSAB and the SAB and those sort of four groups. What is the original group, as far as I understand it, was called the Design Advisory Committee. But there's reference now to that Design Advisory Council. What is that council or group?
I don't know. I heard it as the sign advisory council as well. Something that happened long time ago before the regular advisory board, that people went to that board beforehand. I think that was probably when I was a kid.
Well, I don't know if it's just a confusion, but there's reference to the Sign Advisory Council, which we all know is the sign thing. And then there's also been discussion about a Design Advisory Council. So is that a whole nother group that's like overseeing the smaller regional advisory groups? I'm a little confused about
I'm seeing Mary's hand up. Mary, do you want to add something?
Yeah, thanks, Angus. I believe I could be wrong, likely wrong, but I believe that the Design Advisory Council was the group that got together to write Building with Nantucket in mind. That was my understanding of what that group might have been.
Well, back in the, I want to say 80s, maybe early 90s, I remember when it was started, an associate of mine was on it. And it was, I guess, just the downtown area. And it was called the Design Advisory Committee or Council, I'm not even sure. And maybe they were involved in Building with Nantucket in mind too. But then later on, the Wisconsin Advisory Committee came in, and Nantucket and Tuckernuck. So the original one I thought was called Design Advisory, and then at some point that must have morphed over into Historic Structures Advisory Board. So it's that just the names are confusing me a little bit. And if there's, are they really talking about reconstituting a Design Advisory Council, which would be a whole nother council or advisory group? So I don't.
And 1988, Thursday, March 24th, 1988. It's in the INM. The HDC has always been a thorn in the side of a few builders, but the addition of the Design Advisory Council has caused mixed feelings in many. Okay, so nothing new under the sun. I think you're right. Looks like it was Chris Holland. It was designed to lighten the load of the HDC. It looks like something Pat was involved in the establishment of. The council is a group of appointed designers whose primary purpose is to advise and make recommendations. That was Dirk Van Loo. Applicants are only referred to them if there is a difficult situation which they could be helpful in. All 5 appointed members of the commission are registered architects or designers, said Marcia Fader. And seems like it was set up to help people who were bringing in architects who didn't work on Nantucket. And to really push people back towards Building with Nantucket in mind. So it sounds like HSAB is serving the function of the Design Advisory Council.
I think we are, and that's fine. But I'm just wondering if, and maybe it's not relevant to what we're talking about at the moment. But are they trying to reconstitute this Design Advisory Council as a separate group from HSAB and SAD and all those?
Or would the design, if there is a path towards establishing the Design Advisory Council, does HSAB just get moved into that and with a different name?
Right. Fine.
There are so many facets to this discussion, but I guess what my primary focus was, how do you guys feel about reviewing applications? Because that was a suggestion, and I think that is Well, I'd love to hear your comments on it, but
You mean for our group here to be reviewing it, like HSAB and SAB? I don't think that's a good idea. I mean,
Yeah.
there's plenty for us to do as it is, let alone reviewing other things.
I would say
that's
that's
my
not,
opinion, but Clement,
no, I would say that's not part of the mission of the historical commission. I mean, we've worked along hard to come up with our mission. And just because we need help right now with, or I assume HDC needs help with advisors, that should not fall upon the Nantucket Historic Commission.
Abby or David?
I think I share Clement's opinion there.
I
As well.
I would agree. Sorry, David. I feel like it could be a slippery slope. And so I think we just want to be mindful that we're within our mission, because then we don't want it to secretly become our mission. And then people just think it's our mission, even if it's not really our mission. So that would just be my concern. I see Mary nodding, like, I feel like if you informally do it, then suddenly it becomes a thing. And then people are like, oh, that's what they do, even if it's not what we're supposed to do. So I think that would be my concern. So I agree with Clement of like, we can be very specific if we're offering assistance and help, but that, like, I wouldn't necessarily think we should take all of that on.
Thank you, Abby. Well, I just wanted to get everyone's temperature. It sounds like we're all in the same headspace about this, that it's sort of outside our mission, certainly related, but not what any of us signed up to do on this commission. And there's certainly plenty of resources to do that as far as the existing advisory boards, and it would sort of change the dynamic in the MOU that we've crafted between the HDC and the NHA. So good. Well, I just wanted to touch base with that. So on to the surveys.
I just, if while we're still on that topic, as far as
Yes, Holly.
advisory boards,
Please go ahead.
and I thank you. I think that's important for you all to be on the record about that. You saw the different options, that there's work to be done as far as actually, if this is something that the HDC wants. At the end of the day, there's nothing in their legislation giving them the power to appoint people out of their commissions. Whether people agree with how it was done or disagree or whatever the case is, at the end of the day, if there's no authority, even if it was done 40 years ago, there's no authority. So that's the biggest crutch of it all. Even with the with the select board reconstituting the sign advisory council, there is an amendment that I'm in charge of getting done before the town meeting to fix that. So that way that they are formally constituted through that process with set of parameters, what have you. And it sounds like to me from just discussions with the HDC that they want to be able to have that authority. So at the end of the day, that means amending the special act. Where that part is going to go, I don't know, but I do want to let everybody know, all applications are being reviewed. We also receive comments from public folks, some people that are in this meeting today. We also sometimes receive comments from MPT. Appreciate those. Anything that the public that has knowledge on applications, advisement, what have you, those are helpful, obviously not through just the process, but also helpful for me, staff, to say, yes, this is something I back up. I agree with these comments wholeheartedly, or whatever the case may be. I know people have said, even in HDC meetings, that there's not multiple of preservation planners like me, But at the end of the day, it takes a village and it takes multiple people from multiple talented, folks that if you do see something, please let me know. If it's something that I have already notated, I will let you know. I am providing staff comments like I have before, in addition to other comments that I've received to the commission on all applications. You should see my agendas. They're highlighted pretty much all yellow for everything that I'm looking at. So in lieu of having our actual advisory boards in place, that's what's going on. Again, I encourage anybody who has comments for applications before the HDC to let me know those comments. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Holly. And thank you for encouraging input and helping facilitate messages getting to the HDC that are helpful to you and to the HDC.
The only thing I might add to this conversation is, at least I know I can speak for HSAB, and I think SAB is doing similarly, is that we're doing it on our own. So it's not that big a deal. I'm doing HSAB's sort of organizing of the agenda and the editing the notes. In order for it's not that much more work, but it was a little easier before when Esmeralda was publishing an agenda that we had. And I'm just wondering if maybe the town could authorize staff at the HDC or Plus to sort of facilitate or assist call them private advisory boards at the moment, and similarly to how they were before, because I think it might be a little bit more organized if we had some follow through, just like we did originally. Go ahead, Holly.
Unfortunately, that would constitute as a public type of meeting. When the town's involved, it has to meet open meeting law requirements, posted meetings, all those type of things. So, but on your comment about looking through the agenda, you're not the only one. Nantucket as well, their residents they're actually really happy about not having to meet open meeting law requirements and not having to have posted meetings and all these things. And they're able to provide comments, and they're either read by Bruce Mandel, who actually comes to the meetings, or he'll even send them to staff as well. Esmeralda, in lieu of not having those individual agendas that she was creating for the advisory boards, because as you know, she copied me, and then that would remind me, okay, yep, this is on my to-do list as well. That was one of my comments. I said, back in the day, the agendas used to be color-coded by location. So that's actually, she's done that again. Yeah. So if you look at the recent agendas, at least you can tell that they're color-coded. She's also getting everything up on the web as much as possible, as early as possible. So all I can really say is, without having, these formally constituted as they were, set up as they were, is for folks to just look at the posted agenda. So for instance, for next week, look at posted agenda. If there's stuff that's come up that you all haven't, anybody hasn't provided comments on or want to provide comments, it's all color coded. Yellow, green, I think blue are the three main colors for, in town, Sconset or Nantucket are the three prominent ones that we see. So it's there. Very helpful to kind of catch your eye. Oh, look, there's applications for these geographical areas of the town. And again, she posts those up. They'll be up over the weekend. So if, for instance, there's something on Tuesday's agenda, somebody wants to take a look, hey, what's going on in my area? The links to those applications will be up over the weekend. That's all I can really say.
And that's fine. I think there is some sort of ease to not having to be more private than public, because we don't record the meetings. We don't have open meeting law issues. So in a way it's almost better, but I thought it worked pretty well before too. So.
Well, I'm happy to hear the color coding's back. I've missed that. That's helpful. Shall we go on to the surveys? I want to make sure that I know last time we didn't have we hadn't had enough time to review Sconset. And now we've gotten some of their Form Bs. I had them for a while to look at. So maybe we can start with Sconset and then we can go into the fish lots.
Chair, I was thinking, I was actually going to pull some up onto the screen. What I was thinking, since we don't have Betsy, either Betsy or Marcia here, to kind of, I will write down in Word some of the comments that everybody comes up with, unless you have any already. And I figured maybe I, as staff, will send them an email and just copy the commission that way, since I'm trying to help facilitate. And I can start off with that with some of the comments that I've had, if that's okay with you. So I wanted to, let's see. Mine are more generic than anything. All right. So I think the GIS has been my comment overall. I did notice that one of the revised application or Form Bs that we received from them used the town's GIS. I'm not quite sure where this GIS comes from. It's not really eye-catching. It should be very similar to what we see with PALs, which are they're using the town's GIS, and that should be consistent, especially how these are something that this commission is blessing moving forward. I also did notice that some of them weren't as clear as to what the property was. This font's kind of different. It was when you do the print form, it's more legible now, but when you do the print form, you want to make sure that if somebody's going to print that off the internet and they're going to utilize that, it's going to be visible for them to actually have it in their hand. And I was having some issues with some of them that they had. So, as well as it wasn't clear on this is the actual property. Like, for instance, you can tell that's darker around 5 Broadway, but maybe it should be more pronounced. So that was my comment on that. And then I did like the fact, I'll scroll through here. I know that they've had this challenge of taking their very, very robust histories and combining them into the Form B format. They are indicating, which I'm glad to see this, as their source down here, and that you can pick a copy up of the full report from Sconset Trust. That's great. I did notate that there was one of these in here, which I haven't, I don't remember which one it was, but I have a note on it, that it wasn't consistent. So for instance, if this is where the link is going to be to say, hey, you can find the report of this entire property at the Sconset Trust website, then it should be in this particular location under bibliography and references. And there was another one that I think it was under here instead. Just that consistency, I think, is very important, especially if Clement, if Sconset Trust is going to hopefully continue maybe working on these as you guys can.
Yes, ma'am.
Again, this is helpful for our overall survey plan. And obviously we as the town, the historical commission, want to encourage this with our public and our private partners, both Sconset and NPT. I think that would be very, very helpful. And then one other thing I noticed too is under historical maps. So I know now the commission's seen a lot of the proposed Form Bs from PAL, and you've seen these Form Bs from Sconset Trust. There's a lot of historical maps and plans. However, not like, for instance, this particular one doesn't have any to visually see. Sometimes including the Sanborn maps would be helpful. They're outlining them here. I don't think every single thing needs to be outlined or shown visually, but I do think it would be helpful to have at least a couple, maybe 2 or 3, because I also don't see in this particular Form B, which this is a very significant historic structure, I don't see any photographs of historically, and I know at NHA has quite a bit. So I think these are my overall comments on it. But other than that, I think these are great. And I'd look forward to hearing the commissioners' comments.
Thank you, Holly. Anyone else?
Well, I mean, I think the Sanborn map should be, maybe you have a link there of how to connect it, but to put the Sanborn map on every single one of them, I don't know that we need that. Also, I thought the photos were there, but the historic photos, but I don't have them right in front of me, so I can't remember. And I mean, I agree that the GIS should be consistent all over Nantucket Form Bs. And the ones that PAL has done do seem that it's very clear. It doesn't give you as much of a idea of the surrounding streetscapes, but you're supposed to be talking about the main structure anyway. So identifying clearly where the main structure is important, and having it consistent would be important. And I guess anybody that's looking through these, should be able to, like you said, go to wisconsintrust.com.org and find the official full house history, which they can do, and they will continue to be able to do that.
Anyone else? I personally noted the lack of photos. I think that that's so helpful, and with it being electronic, it's not a lot. It's not a lot more to add, but they're also, if as Clement was suggesting, if there weren't photos or maps or other documents, to have a link that you could easily get to them if you wanted to. But I mean, is it a problem with too much volume to include those in with this? I guess, the only time that would be an issue is with the hard copy, which we hopefully will eventually have. But as far as the electronic copies, I think that would be helpful, to not have to. I mean, I thought one of the goals with these new surveys was that you would have all the information at hand in one place. So I think that would be helpful to have that extra information.
And they're being done. I mean, one of the biggest benefits of these is to guide the HDC in their review process. And the photographs would be really helpful to see, old historic photos and, evolution type photos of each structure. So definitely the more the better.
As you mentioned, when the HDC is looking at it, or the advisory boards, or anyone who cares, it comes down to time. And if it's one more facet that you have to chase down, you might be less likely to find the information to be able to utilize it. Holly, I think that's a good suggestion to include that extra information.
Thank you. And I also wanted to, I've been picking up a lot of different things from looking at PALs. And one thing that I really, really like, one part of their forms, and this is nothing against, I know a lot of, again, it has to do with Betsy and Marcia doing this robust cultural and architectural reports and trying to squeeze it into this very prescriptive Form B, which they can be multiple pages. You don't have to have 3, you can add on different things. But looking at what PAL's been doing, for instance, take a look at 3 Grand Avenue, which is a Charles H. Robinson. I love Charles Robinson. There's a few of Nantucket's prominent architects that I just love. And this one thing that I noticed with PAL is when they're talking about these people that are prominent, that they would have their dates of like you do a genealogy. So they would put his the time frame that he lived in after their name, just like Frake and Ellis. You would do the same thing. Those consistencies. One thing I also noticed too with PAL is, and maybe this is because they've been concentrated just in the fish lots, but I think it's important. They've been able to also identify any other properties that that particular person has been associated with. So if you remember some of the ones we looked at in the fish lots, they've identified, oh, Charles H. Robinson did, or another one is John B. Nicholson, another one of my favorites, did this one, and this one. And you can actually link by the Macris number, and they would actually show it in here in their historical narrative in bold. Oh, look, they also did this one and this one. So those are just some other key things. But even just really kind of, okay, Adeline, you know, what are her dates? Those are things that I think should be consistent. And one of the references would be like find a grave. If you've looked at their whole list of bibliography that they've been able to use, I just think that that's another thing to really to look at. And again, I understand it can be cumbersome of taking this very robust report and trying to condense it into this format.
Again, so helpful to have connecting links and things highlighted so that you can get a fuller story if you so desire. Holly, while you have this $3,000, I just emailed you some photos that apply to this this survey, because I'm seeing the date of construction 1876. But the the latest renovation here, there really isn't anything left. The sheathing, the framing, the fenestration, the massing on the roof, they're all gone. And so at what point, at what point is something still historic? And I think that's helpful to, something for us to think about. And, as far as historic fabric and integrity, at what point is it a historic building or not?
Yeah, I agree with Angus. I mean, unfortunately, this is one that's right on the cusp because it was in the form of that picture that you just showed, and now it is no longer recognizable, and there's none of the constructions, none of the pieces of that house are still there. So would you, in this case, do you have some kind of stamp that says demolished or reconstructed, or because anybody coming to Sconset looking for 3 Grand Avenue is not going to recognize that. Anyway, hopefully that doesn't happen often, but it certainly did on this house.
I think it's key that they've indicated that the condition right now is that it's under renovation. And one other term I've seen floating around with a lot of these different surveys over the years is, altered is a very simple word, but just you're basically describing that it's been completely altered.
Yes.
But again, there's one thing I think we need to realize that some of these structures they were built in a time frame, like for this one being in a Victorian, eclectic even. It was built in a very specific time in history where you had these ornate features, and then over time those diminished. And it's very common, especially on Nantucket, if those are elements that, hey, you know what, that'd be better in the wood stove than it is on my building. And I'm obviously ad-libbing here, but they've
Like
evolved, but the
gingerbread.
structure, yes, the gingerbread features, the verge boards, the brackets, all of that. If those have dwindled, and yes, maybe the sheathing over time has changed, but if that structure still keeps its character defining features, its mass, its bulking, maybe it's been not, I guess, rehabilitated to a different format. It's not in its complete state, if you will. And I think that's where the interior aspect, when NPT works with PIN on working on the interior surveys, is very helpful, because obviously if if it's been gutted, they don't have any of those interior features. It's really hard from an exterior perspective. Now, I know with this one, there are features that were going to be put back, that were taken off back from the Robinson era, that are going to bring it back to its Victorian fauna, if you will. But, where it stands right now, I know it's been kind of a sore thing to see up there in Sconset over the last few months.
No, I mean, it's a perfectly nice building. It's just not that building. So, I mean, I guess the plan is, it says under renovation. I think you'd just have to say totally changed in 2022, but I mean, I don't know. And then the idea, I guess, going forward is if these are, I mean, the Form Bs are bound to be, these buildings will change over time. So, it is.
Yeah.
That's
That's part of the four, different aspects of preservation. Most of the structures that we see, unless they're, are a form that come through, say, the HDC for some changes, an addition, what have you, are a form of rehabilitation. But, when you add on, usually you're wanting to, have it that you're supposed to have it so that it's in a manner in which that it can be removed. Just like how we look at solar, if you take that off, you're not hurting any character defining features, and its actual integrity. I don't know, maybe this is a case study to see.
Well, I'm just thinking that if some research person is trying, which is the whole idea about this, and maybe I assume Form Bs are dated of when they were sent in, or there it is. So that when you see that, things could have changed since then. So I mean, they have to have a starting place. So
and this is why I think, with especially this one in particular, I've seen historic photographs of the way this structure looked when it was part of the overall hotel. I think it's important to have those photos with this Form B, because somebody's going to be able to look at the existing photograph of when it was, dated September 2022, look at those historic photographs, and if they're standing in front of this structure, go, oh, okay, and maybe kind of have an aha moment. They added this, but they brought this back. I think that is important for the overall.
I agree with you. I'm just what I'm asking you is for kind of next steps. Do you want to make your comments to Marcia and Betsy? And I think that would be totally appropriate, and if they can do these changes, I agree with you. I think we've got to be consistent on our maps, and consistent with PAL as much as we can do. I mean, Marcia, as you know, they've been struggling with this. So I think any advice they can be given as to what we want to include, and if they can include the photographs, because I know the photographs are in the history. So I mean, it shouldn't be hard for them to get them into the Form Bs as well. So that would be very helpful.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that was been my overall comment looking at all these. And I obviously want everybody else to speak, Mr. Chair, sorry. But I've been, really trying to see, okay, what's the basic, and comparing them with some of the other ones I've seen from other locations too, or in the state. They're all predominantly the same thing. You've got the actual architectural characteristics, the history, the social history, and then you get the references and bibliography. But having the photographs intertwined with it, especially when you're dealing with even surveys, historic surveys, for instance, when you're dealing with Underhill, I think having a copy of Underhill's actual plat of the subdivision is very important. So those type of things, those go towards the overall history of the property. So yes, I've been writing notes. If there's any additional, I've been typing them down too.
Well, so like with 3 grand, I think that comparing it to the other Form Bs that we've been looking at from the fish lots that Pal's been doing, there's been at least one historic photo with every Form B. And so I think that there needs to be a minimum of that. I'm sure there are dozens and dozens of photographs of this structure. And this was a particularly interesting one because things have been added and taken away and moved. And it's interesting that way. And there's certainly with older structures, there's an evolution. Some stay purer than others, but to have that documented in that area of major alterations, it's helpful to have a date and what changed and so forth. But in this situation, like with the condition, when it says under renovation, I would, this is a reconstruction. So I think, I think it's to the layman, renovation and restoration often go hand in hand, and people aren't usually aware of the nuance differences of that. But this is, I think, beyond a renovation or a restoration. It's a reconstruction. So I just think as a form, if I didn't have my own personal, witnessing of this project, I would look at this and think, oh, it's an 1876 structure and it's under a renovation. It's not there anymore. Pretty much all of the other surveys that I looked at, really well written. There weren't any, there weren't, in some of the PALs, there were like, typo things, but all these seem pretty perfect. And I would agree with Holly's comments about, just the other information, sort of the broad sweep comments that you made. Everything was quite interesting and a lot to cover. They went certainly more in depth than PAL's Form Bs, and I think that's helpful to see the different styles and who covers what and how, as we're looking at a third contingent vying for the next section of fish lots and Brant Point. It's just, how are people doing these Form Bs? And all of them are spectacular compared to the 89 windshield surveys. So yeah, these are all very, very helpful, but it's also helpful to see the different strengths that the historians have brought forth in their surveys. Any other comment? I feel like we're sort of coming towards the end of our meeting and we're just sort of starting into these reviews. Maybe we should just continue this in our next meeting. I know they were looking forward to getting these off, but I feel like there might be some things that might want to get added or revised before they head off to the state.
I would definitely like to give them, and I will copy the commission, an email and say, we reviewed these and these are our overall comments. I think, like we talked about, that way they have those, they know what we're wanting to look at for that consistency purposes. Other than that, I really don't want to hold them up because again, they're going to have that MHC review.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, those I think are common. I was just looking at consistencies between the two different consultants and making sure that we're all on the same page, and what we as, what you all as a commission, what I would like as staff to see with all of these moving forward. So. And I know, there's a certain level of information that MHC is used to. And I know sometimes even when Mary has to do these, I'm going to put you on the spot for a second, Mary, if you don't mind, but sometimes that when you have to do these for preservation restrictions, that they're really wanting to look at, like, where does this structure fit into the overall time period in the setting of the island. And I think that's going to be key moving forward with a lot of with the survey plan. And obviously PAL's got that down pat. But that's going to be important to make sure that each one of these areas and structures are going to be able to fit into the overall setting of Nantucket.
So how do you all feel about, with comments that we've maybe, I was going to say with comments that maybe you could send around us, and then we could send on our approval. I would say let's go ahead and make a motion to approve these. But it sounds like there are things that we would want to have change with them or revised with them. Can we do that simultaneously? Can we kind of like what the HDC would call, with staff approval?
Yeah.
Yep. Are you all comfortable with that, commissioners?
Sure.
Just to keep the ball moving forward, but I would want these things to get addressed.
Yes. So, Mr. Chair, I will send an email to the commission with all these notes that I've been taking and basically what I've said and what you've said, synthesizing everything, saying this is what we'd like to see changed. Send that to you all. You all, if you're good with that, then we'll send it off to Betsy and Marcia and go from there.
Can I have a motion from someone to do that?
So
Yeah.
moved.
I'll
Do I have a
second.
second? Thank you, Clement. So all in favor, I'll just go through everybody. David?
Aye.
Thank you. Abby?
Aye.
Clement?
Yep, aye.
Nikki?
Aye.
And I as well. Good. So we'll look forward to seeing those from you, Holly, and then we'll be able to get that off. I know that there are more surveys coming, and we'll be continuing to go through this process, but at least we can get this first group off.
Yes. And what we will do is it sounds like usually when she sends them to you and I'll do what I did before and just immediately send them off to the commissioners so that you all can start looking at them ahead of our next meeting.
And Holly, may I request it? So I know it's wasting paper, but it's so much easier for me to see them.
Oh,
If I could
yes.
come by the, pick up the packet.
Just
like-
let me know. Yeah. Whoever, like I did before, just, yep, I can do that. Not a problem.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm always happy to have that too, but maybe we could share it. Maybe I could take it from you after you have it and we could have both our comments on there. I don't know.
Good idea. Good idea.
There was one other thing I wanted to do about the surveys. In the links to the surveys, there would be 3 typical links with each application or each survey. One was the photo, and then the other 2 were the same. Was that
Yes.
intentional?
Yes, that is intentional. Basically, we had asked for them to provide it to us in a PDF, but they're required to have the word in an actual, they have to print them out a certain way. There's certain standards for MHC, certain type of paper stock that has to be provided. And so they were just sending what they are going to have to provide to them anyways, the photo separately from the.
I kept thinking, shoot,
Yeah.
am I missing something? Is one of these that
No.
looks identical? Is this the one
No.
that has all the missing photos?
No, not at all. And, you know, I mean, that's, yeah, we've seen that before. On the topic of Form Bs with PAL, they have taken our comments that have been provided, and they'll be incorporating those into those changes. We have not seen those yet, but we will be seeing those. We've received 99 surveys. Can you imagine that? 99. It's awesome. So exciting. And then as far as our the survey plan, we received this week a report, Angus and I, as well as the state. And I will be more than happy to send that off to the commission as well, so you can take a look at it at your leisure. But what will happen now is MHC will reach out and schedule a Zoom meeting with myself, Angus, and if you're able to attend, Angus, and PAL, to go over where they are in the survey plan. We're getting to the end of this particular grant. So time is of the essence, and turnaround is going to be very quickly. Yes.
Oh, I was going to thank you for doing that. And yes, I would like to attend if I'm
Absolutely.
free.
Yep.
But you guys are in for a document. It's like 250 pages for the island-wide survey, and I've just barely started digging into it. So I cut you off, Holly. Was there anything?
No, I was just gonna say, well, the reports is not long, but it's what they've done to really take our NHL data that was done with the 2012 update. Thank you, MPT and CPC. And synthesizing that and correlating it with GIS. It was never done before. So that was, if you remember correctly, that was why we wanted to have an extension with them with the contract and give them additional funding that we had earmarked through town meeting. But also we knew that this was going to be the crux of the entire survey plan. One of the key things out of this survey plan tells us how long this is going to take, and they're estimating about a 10-year process. So obviously with Sconset Trust assisting us with this, and as MPT does their preservation restrictions, obviously that's one less Form B within the overall process. And they have really come up with a great way of giving us a framework of moving forward into what areas as far as priorities go. So I think this is great. This is what we wanted. So very, very happy on that. And then move forward, talk briefly without putting out there, but we received 2 proposals for our fiscal year 22 MHC grant. Been reviewing those, and I'll be giving a final who we would like to MHC, so they can hopefully bless and concur with us on that, and we can move forward with that contract. I'm waiting right now for our signed contract with the state and the town. So each one of these grants has a contract with the state, and we have a contract with whoever the consultant is. So there's 2 contracts for each one. Right now we're in the middle of 2. And yeah, we're doing good. And I know we're at the end of our time here, but yeah, I was happy to see more than one proposal and that people are interested in Nantucket. So very cool.
Thank you, Holly. I think we're gonna have to leave the rest of the agenda to the next time. Would anyone like to make a motion to
I move that we adjourn.
adjourn?
Second.
You second, Abby. Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Angus.
Meeting.
Thanks,
Take
everybody.
care. Bye.
Bye, guys.